Hi, welcome to Gardening with David Grau. Here we are in my front yard in Chico. This is May 20th, a warm breezy day, and I wanted to talk to you about planting your summer beans and squash and cucumbers and okra, because that's what's here in my front yard. And you can see these pole beans. This is Kentucky Wonder, have just come up and they've done quite well, and I was a little surprised. I was worried that right after I planted, the weather got cold, we had a lot of rain. I thought, oh, those seeds may rot in the ground, but they didn't. They're looking great. And you'll see that I have this row of beans here. I planted a seed about every 2 inches, and when these plants are about 3 inches tall, when they have maybe their second set of true leaves. These leaves here are the true leaves, and then the cotyledons, which look like the bean, are before the true leaves. Here's one right here that's real evident. Those are the cotyledons, and the true leaves are just starting there. Healthy looking plants. These were planted about an inch into the ground, and with larger seeds like beans and melons too, you can plant them even 2 inches deep. Later in the season, if you have pre-irrigated or your ground is wet, you can plant into damp ground and not irrigate till they come up. And this is going to give you a huge jump on the weeds. I don't seem to have too many weeds happening here. It looks great, actually. We've got this row of beans here, and then there's a row of okra just starting over here, just a couple plants up, squash and cucumbers, and then another row of beans over there. So this whole area here, I would say in a month, will be just covered with green. There'll be rows of pole beans here, and then the squash and cukes will be filling in all the rest. So next week, we will thin these plants and wheel hoe. There'll probably be a few weeds to deal with. The soil, the way we worked this soil was we used our Valley Oak broad fork and broad forked it and added about ½ inch to 1 inch of compost and 20 pounds of rock phosphate per 1,000 square feet, 30 pounds of oyster shell per 1,000 square feet, and about 40 pounds of gypsum per 1,000 square feet, and then a little bit of kelp meal sprinkled on. We mixed all that in with the wheel hoe, and there's other videos to show how to do that already on our list. These rows, the beans are planted, the beans and okra are about 30 inches apart. The other rows are about almost 5 feet, 4.5 feet apart, because those vines are going to run, and this whole area will be covered. So when I farmed, I grew my melons and squash and tomatoes. The rows were 5 feet apart, and partly that was for convenience of use tractor cultivation, but that's actually 4 to 5 feet is not a bad spacing for rows of tomatoes and squash, because the plant is going to be, 3.5, 4 feet across, and you want to be able to walk between the rows. These bean plants, they're about 2 inches apart now. I'm going to thin them to about 6 inches apart, but I'm going to wait till they're about that tall so that if some of them get some insect damage, I don't have a big gap. Like here's a gap right here between there and there. That's about 8 inches, and there's a plant here and there's 2 here. I'll probably leave both of those and then leave this one, and this is a little far apart and these are too close together, so I'll pull out some of these. So we'll see that next week. In terms of the soil condition for planting, you want a somewhat fine seed bed. You don't want big clods, and you also want your ground broken up so that the roots can easily penetrate and get the nutrients and water, spread out their roots. That's where the broad forking comes in, and the wheel hoeing to mix in nutrients, and then the raking it with just a bow rake to get a flat seed bed. And you can see this soil is really nice texture, and I'm lucky to have a good soil. But this is actually a clay soil, a little on the clay side, but it's really loose. The seeds can easily come up through that, and the reason is organic matter. Organic matter and a nice calcium ratio with the gypsum and the powdered oyster shell makes this clay soil loose. Here's a clod, but even that, if you have the right moisture, that breaks open easily enough. And that's the other thing, you don't want to get a crust on the top of your soil when your seeds are emerging, because they have a hard time pushing up through a crust. And so if having your soil loose like this on top with the organic matter, that helps. And also managing your soil moisture. The way that I'm irrigating now, I'm using that Rainbird sprinkler there, and that moistens the whole area. I run it for, gosh, probably 45 minutes every other day if the weather's dry, until those seeds are up. And then I'm going to switch to drip irrigation later during the summer and only irrigate where the plants are to keep the weeds down and economize on water. But sprinklers are great for sprinkling up a crop, getting the seed nice moisture and keeping the top soil moist and therefore not crusty. I will switch to drip irrigation when the plants are about, I don't know, a foot tall. So I'm going to let them grow quite a bit, and I'll come in here and I'll wheel hoe, and then I'll thin and weed within the row, and then I'll lay out the drip irrigation. So this is May 20th, it's probably going to be June 15th. Some people drip right from the beginning, you can do that, but you don't need to. I find sprinklers very useful for certain things, and getting a crop up is one of those things.